Okay, this video is Chapter 9 from How to Improve Blood Flow. This book, also called The Tale of Two Tubs. There's a title, How to Improve Blood Flow by Peter Rogers, MD. And basically, we're going to talk about water. And also, when I give these online talks, they're like an adapted screenplay. There's certain things that go better with video, plus I can add in all the photos, the drawings. There's other things that just work better in a book, but for what it's worth, we're going to talk a lot about water today. The first painting here is of Pygmalion with Galatea. The sculptor designed this sculpture of a lady, and he fell in love with her, and every nerdy guy kind of has this dream. He's going to like save a woman, and she's going to fall in love with him, but in real life, don't happen too often quite like that. Okay, you teach her how to be skinny, and then she thinks she's too good for you. So anyways, 20 years ago, if you walked up to a table and there was an empty seat with a diet soda on the table, it was a reasonable bet that a fat lady had been sitting there. Nowadays, the same is true if you see a giant water bottle. It's the latest fad that fat women walk around with sipping water from a bottle, okay? And I'm not talking about drinking bottled water. I'm talking about walking around with a big bottle of water, okay? There's a much better way to lose weight. It's become a vegan, okay? Wake up, women. You look all over the world, and you're going to see the plant-based populations where they're eating 90% or more plant-based. They're skinny, okay? That's the way you do it. All these modern fad diets, almost none of them work long-term, and they're not sustainable. So water deficiency is not the reason you are fat. Yeah, because tons of women are saying, well, I drink a lot of water. I drink a lot of water. I drink a lot of water. I think that's all nonsense. All right, the Monty Python joke's not a question where he grips it. Okay, anyways, another thing is a lot of women, they put a lot of endocrine disrupting chemicals on themselves. It's very common. I see a lot of women rubbing estrogen all over themselves, including my wife. All right, there's some reason that's in their minds that they have to do all this stuff. You have to put deodorant on and some moisturizer, perhaps some sunscreen and some cosmetics and a shampoo and a conditioner. You don't need all that stuff. I don't use any of that stuff. I mean, don't get me wrong. Guys might have a little bit different feeling about cosmetic or whatever stuff, but you don't need that stuff. You really don't need 95+% of it. Lots of women are taking oral contraceptives. Typically, it's EE2, ethinyl estradiol. Also, when they urinate, they void into the toilet. That water goes into the municipal drinking water. The estrogenic chemicals in municipal water are typically not removed that much. You would be amazed at how much estrogenic chemicals there are in the drinking water. Tap water will also contain phthalates, other estrogenics. You've always got at least like 3 estrogenics in your tap water just from the get-go. Atrazine is a common herbicide sprayed on corn, a lot of times sprayed on lawns, very estrogenic. That's the one that turns male frogs into female frogs. Phthalates is super common in plastics. It's like a plastic conditioner, and a lot of people look at their bottle. Turn your bottle of water upside down, and you'll often see PET, polyethylene terephthalate. Well, that's phthalate right there. It's estrogenic. That's one of the problems with bottled waters is it'll be sitting on a hot truck, and it'll be outgassing, if you will, the plastic into the water, creating more estrogenic chemicals in that water. So unless you at least get a carbon filter for your drinking water, you're drinking somebody else's birth control pill. They urinated into the water. Okay, I don't want that. Better yet, reverse osmosis removes more. We'll talk about that some more in just a moment. If you can afford it, it's nice to have a whole house carbon water filter. Remove all the estrogenics from your water. Because when you shower, there's some transdermally absorbed. Okay? Now, some people drink bottled water. The plastic itself will often contain estrogenics. Sit on a hot truck for hours. The best thing to store your water in is glass, because glass is relatively inert, so it's not going to put anything in your water. Now, what about drinking distilled water? I personally think that's a bad idea because a lot of people are sensitive to the hypo-osmolarity, meaning the lack of particles in it. Some people do it and they think it's the best thing, and there's actually some pretty famous biochemists who recommend people drink bottled distilled water, but I don't think so. I think it's too over-purified, and I think that's sort of the water paradox. The more you purify it to get all the bad stuff out, the more hypo-osmolar it gets, meaning the fewer particles it has in it, and that potentially can, cause it to make your blood a little hyponatremic, being too low in particles. So you have to be careful about that. The obvious workaround is you can squeeze squeeze a lemon into it to get more particulate matter in there. You can also eat first, is what I would do before I drink water. Always eat first. I really don't drink too much water. I get my water just from eating all these plant foods. And I'll be eating only the OMAD diet, and I don't drink water the rest of the day, and I'm perfectly fine. I'm adequately hydrated. If I'm going to work out, though, yeah, it's true. I'll guzzle a big thing of beet juice, and I'll guzzle 16 ounces of water to chase it down and rinse my teeth off. And I know from a lot of experience testing everything that makes me the strongest and have the best endurance for lifting weights. Okay, what is TDS? TDS is total dissolved solid. So that's a number of particles per unit of volume. So imagine you've got like a square centimeter. How many particles are in there? When you look at, you can buy a TDS meter, total dissolved solid meter, for around $10 or $20. It looks like a pen, so it just looks like something like this. And you can then you put it into the water, and then it'll display the number on it of how many particles per unit volume are in the water. And so the lower the particle number, the more purified the water. It's not exactly the same thing as osmolality, but the concepts are totally related, and pretty much you can almost use them interchangeably. For practical purposes, it's reasonable to use them interchangeably. It's a little bit different, though, in the sense that the particles in water are considered dead, if you will, and water is a Newtonian fluid, the same at rest as it is flowing slow or flowing fast, versus blood is what you call non-Newtonian. Blood is what's called thixotropic, which is a fancy way of saying the particles in it are alive and they behave differently whether or not the blood is stationary, moving slowly, or moving fast. The point being is, when blood is stationary or even moving slow, it might aggregate. The red cells and the platelets all start sticking together and form a clot. So that's what thixotropic means. Water is Newtonian, so they're two different types of fluids. Okay, at rest, blood will clot. I actually think that's why if you go on a long drive, a long commute, and let's say you're in the car for 2 hours, when you first try to get out, everything is stiff and slow because your blood's largely aggregated. It has to sort of loosen up again to be able to more adequately deliver oxygen. What about osmolality? Blood osmolality is about 285 to 300. So let's just say 300 particles per unit volume, okay, whatever that is. Tap water will tend to have a TDS of around 500. Carbon filtered waters has a TDS around 200. Reverse osmosis filtered water anywhere from about 10 to 110. Distilled water 0 to 2 particles per unit of volume. So what I'm saying is these numbers are close enough that we can kind of go by them. So what I'm basically saying is tap water, you could just guzzle it straight. There's so many particles in it. Versus carbon filtered water, you probably could guzzle that. But reverse osmosis, I would not just drink it straight because you might get a headache from hyponatremia. I would, squeeze a lemon into it or eat first, something to make it more particulate, if you will. Like if I drink, let's say before I'm going for a personal best in weightlifting, I'll guzzle 32 ounces of beet juice and then I'll guzzle reverse osmosis 16 ounces of water. But I wouldn't guzzle that 16 ounces unless I'd first had something else that was hyper-osmolar, meaning a lot of particles per unit of volume. I'm afraid of hyponatremia. You've heard about water intoxication syndrome in the marathon runners who got too much water, who drank too much water. That can be a problem. They can have seizures. They can even die from that. I mean, that's massive quantities. That's somebody who keeps drinking every 500 meters while they're running a marathon. They drink a lot of water that way. Okay, how does TDS correlate with how much water we drink? It depends on the age and the size of the person. And I'm talking about adults here. With tap water, it's easy to satisfy. Okay, carbon filtered water, it's easy to satisfy. Like myself, if I drink a lot of RO water without anything else, I'll get a headache. It kind of scares me. Let's see, especially be careful if you're like giving it to a baby or something. I would not do that. I'd be careful about doing that. Okay, I always eat first and then I rinse my teeth off at the end of the meal by drinking reverse osmosis water. Eating first gets more particles in your stomach. The water's absorbed pretty rapidly though, faster than a lot of the food is. But this way I talk about here, I've been doing this for many decades. It works for me. What about all this stuff about 8 cups a day? I think that's all BS. And the reason I say that is no one before even knew of such an idea until they started selling bottled water. Then all these commercials came out. You go back to the 1960s and 70s, the marathon champions didn't even drink any water. Okay, your body adjusts its osmolality. I wrestled in college in the 1980s. We'd sweat off 5 or 10 pounds every practice. And we didn't drink any water until after practice, and we would just drink tap water in those days. There was no bottled water in those days. Then a few years later, Gatorade started becoming popular, widely available. And so did bottled water. All of a sudden, after the Gatorade and bottled water became popular, everybody needed to be hydrated, You go to the gym and everybody's carrying around a bottle of water or Gatorade. But, no one did that before and they don't need it. I trained with world champions, Olympic champions, national champions. We didn't drink any water. I never saw anybody drink water during practice. Never saw a water bottle in the room or a Gatorade even in those days. Nowadays, I see people at the gym, they barely break a sweat, and they're always drinking water. Thirst has been a good indicator of how much you need to drink since the beginning of time. Okay, I trust thirst more than these advertisements. Plus, think about it. Does a 300-pound lineman need to drink 8 cups of water and an 80-pound lady the same amount? They're not the same thing. A big guy and a small woman or somebody who's exercising a lot. I mean, if you're running a marathon, you're going to sweat more. But even at the marathon, the body will adjust, during those 26 miles. Okay, what about putting tap water into the fridge? If you put tap water into the fridge, it helps to volatilize off the chlorine. Usually that's pretty much gone within about 24, 48 hours, a little better. I have a friend who's a civil engineer, works in water purification. That's what he does. I actually think he'd be better off with reverse osmosis, or at least a carbon filter. He puts his tap water into a glass pitcher, let it sit in the fridge for 1 or 2 days before he drinks it, mostly because of his concerns about the chlorine and the chlorine metabolites. Also, he's a little bit fat, this civil engineer friend of mine, and I think he doesn't really know much about estrogenics. That's another thing, too, I've seen a lot in life as I've gotten older. A lot of people are really good at one narrow area, but they really, unless they have a curious mind that seeks learning, they often don't know hardly anything about a lot of other areas. So just because somebody knows one area doesn't mean they know another area unless they've made an effort to learn in that area. Okay. Also, I've had women tell me that every single woman in their entire family, and that's a lot of women, they all had to get hysterectomies before the age of 35 because of fibroids. And so when I talk to them a little more, it turns out they're all drinking tap water and they all eat meat. Well, those things both dramatically increase your estrogen. So get a carbon filter. You'll be less likely to need a hysterectomy. Getting a hysterectomy before you're age 35 is bad because it increases your risk of heart failure, dementia, stroke, a lot of problems, okay? Because they stop menstruating, now their hematocrit goes up, their blood viscosity goes up because their red blood cells are older, they're more prone to being glycated. Frequent menstruation keeps refreshing the blood pool, and the young red blood cells are more flexible, more deformable because their outer surfaces are not so glycated. So they're not so stiff. They more readily pass through the capillaries, and that allows blood pressure to be lower because their blood is thinner, more like water than like a thick milkshake. Thick blood makes blood pressure have to go up, and all the complications that come with hypertension. Plus, the women usually aren't as afraid as the men are of atherosclerosis, so they're not paying attention to their diet as much typically. Guys, they get scared at a younger age by having seen other guys go impotent or have myocardial infarctions and whatnot. Okay, yeah, whenever I see a demented female, at a young age, almost always, if there's not some obvious explanation, she's a drug addict or something, yeah, that happens a lot. But let's say it's a non-drug addict, non-smoking female, demented at a young age, I'll almost always go back and I'll find out it's because she had a hysterectomy, before the age of 35. Okay, what type of bottled water should people drink? If you're going to drink bottled water, you should check the type of plastic used for the bottle. Check how it's been purified. I was often amazed at how little information they give on these bottled waters. They often tell you next to nothing. I would like the idea of it being reverse osmosis filtered. Most of them just tell you it's purified. I've looked at 20 in a row at bottled waters in a store. None of them had the TDS on the label. I would like to know that myself. You should check the TDS yourself before you make a long-term commitment to drinking some bottled water. There's some metal chemists, experts who say that the silica in some bottled waters is helpful, that it helps to remove aluminum from the body. Like, let's say Fiji water or something is known to have silica added to the water, and that might lower your risk of dementia in that one hand, but check what the bottle's made out of. Don't be surprised if it's made out of polyethylene terephthalate, PET, that's estrogenic. So you're sort of trading one problem for another. Again, the best thing to do is just RO filter it at home and then store it in glass. Some people would say distill it and then add your lemon water or whatever to it. Okay, now that's the main stuff from the book chapter. Some other stuff, though, relevant here that's in other book chapters, but I'm just going to add it in here, is let's talk a little bit about the chemistry of F-. F- is the most electronegative. That means out of everything in the whole periodic chart of element, it has the strongest desire to grab onto electrons and steal them away from other molecules. That's actually a big deal in chemistry because chemical reactions are all based on what's happening with the electrons in the outer orbital. And so the point I'm saying is F- out of everything in the entire world of chemicals is the most aggressive to grab electrons. It's even more aggressive than oxygen. Oxygen is second most aggressive. And oxygen is a thing that is famous for sitting at the end of the line in electron transport to catch electrons. So what I'm trying to say is F- is even more aggressive than that. Okay, that's actually a big deal. This vertical column here of elements, these are all the halogens. Halogens kill stuff, okay? You need to know that. Halogens kill stuff, all right? Iodine is what was used to prep surgical patients. You know, they often call it povidone, bovidine, whatever. Iodine is used to prep patients for surgery because it kills everything on the skin, okay? Bromine is used to sterilize pools because it's a sanitizer. Chlorine does the same thing, okay? Why do you think they put chlorine in the water? To kill all the bacteria, the parasites, and everything else. All right, and you want that in your water till it gets to your house, but once it's at your house, you don't want that. You don't want that in your shower water, your drinking water. No. F- is so powerful they can't even use it in that context because it's too dangerous, okay? F- is put in a lot of toothpaste and a lot of dentists recommend it, but I think that is a bad idea. It's so powerful, they'll tell you even an amount as small, you know, just the size of a pea, if a baby swallows it, just a little bit bigger than a pea, could potentially make the kid really sick, okay? Some kids, you know, when their dental cleanings have accidentally swallowed too much and gotten sick from that. Not a good thing, okay? And then there's tons of other chemical issues with it that are actually not widely known, but they are highly significant and they've been around and known for a long time. Okay? F-, halogen, it's used in insecticides, rat poison, surgical antiseptic, highest electronegativity. When you talk about a pathogen, what is a pathogenic molecule? Something that causes damage to the body. It's usually something that steals electrons. And so F- out of all the chemicals in the whole world is the one that most wants to steal an electron. Okay, it's not used by the body for anything, nothing. We have zero need for it. It's the greatest electron thief of all molecules. Okay, and when it grabs a hold of its molecule, it steals some electrons as a pathogen. It doesn't want to let go. It usually will not give them back. It forms very strong bonds, much stronger than a carbon-hydrogen bond is a carbon F- bond. It's very small, so it can get into all kinds of mischievous places where you don't want it to be. This enables it to replace hydrogen on other molecules. But the F- is a little bit bigger than hydrogen, and because of that, it'll distort the shape of the protein and often make it non-functional. So that's bad. It gets into proteins, distorts their shape, and makes them not work so well, if at all. F- likes to bind positively charged amino acids on side chains, things like histidine, arginine, lysine. So I remember HAL, H-A-L, for sort of these basic-like amino acid side chains with a positive charge. F- makes a molecule more lipophilic. And what that means is it makes the molecule more able to cross the blood-brain barrier. And that's why if you look at these neuropsychopharmacology type drugs, most of them will have an F- on there. Look at Prozac. What is it? Fluoxetine. What do you think the flu stands for? It's fluoxetine stands for F-. Okay. F- is a waste product of aluminum production. F- leads to a small reduction in dental cavities. Dental associations endorsed F- to prevent cavities, and there's a lot of controversy about that data, whether it's of any true benefit or not. And then when all the side effects came out, then it was obvious it has such a small benefit, even theoretically, that why should one bother with it? But the Dental Association, in my opinion, is a joke. They know it's unhealthy and bad, but they refuse to back off on their previous position because now they've committed to it. And it was used as a waste product of aluminum manufacturing, and so they pressured to get it into the water. It's a way for them to cheaply even sell their waste product. And then once other institutions and bodies have committed to it, now they never want to back off on it because they're afraid they'll get sued. So that's why a lot of times the system cannot fix itself. It simply cannot fix itself because the persons that have the ability to fix it are afraid that they're legally liable for making a change, so they will never change it. And that's why you have to get educated on these things. Otherwise, you risk your health, your family members' health. And don't think there's anyone else that's going to protect you from these problems. They're never going to go away. You just have to learn these things. It's easy to learn. It's easy to avoid this stuff. Okay, the way the halogens work, the suffix will be -ine, so you'll hear things like chlorine, bromine, iodine. Okay, also sort of the prefix will be O if you're going to say chloro something, bromo something, iodo something. Okay, real quick, here's some biochemical pathways. Here's glycolysis, meaning the metabolism of glucose without oxygen. Glucose goes through all these reactions. It's going to end up at pyruvate. Okay, but here's the reason why I'm showing you glycolysis. Now we're in the second half of glycolysis. By the way, take a look at this. Well, hide is an aldehyde, but this is a carboxylic acid, carboxylic acid, carboxylic acid, carboxylic acid, carboxylic acid. Carboxylic acids are really big in biochemistry and metabolism. Anyways, F- inhibits enolase, so that's something that's worth knowing. You should know that glycolysis enzyme, this one here, enolase, is inhibited by F-. That's a big deal, inhibiting glycolysis, the fundamental metabolic pathway of life. Okay, and so that'll kill a bacteria, but guess what? It could have a negative effect on your own human metabolism. Okay, not good. Okay, well, if you didn't think that's a big deal, then it inhibits Krebs cycle, the next step in the pathway. You go from glycolysis to pyruvate to Krebs cycle. It inhibits 3 enzymes in this pathway: aconitase, isocitrate dehydrogenase, and succinate dehydrogenase. That's 3 things. Okay, when you block Krebs cycle, when it's something that inhibits Krebs cycle, you can get accumulation of one of these intermediates. And guess what? When you have an accumulation of a Krebs cycle intermediate, that will sometimes be perceived by the cell as the equivalent of mitochondrial dysfunction. This pathway occurs in the mitochondrial matrix, Krebs cycle. Okay, so what does that mean though? When a cell has mitochondrial dysfunction, it will sometimes activate the cancer pathway of going into anaerobic glycolysis and try to just, even though I know glycolysis is partly inhibited in this, F- is associated with increased risk of cancer in a significant sense. It's a very powerful anti-metabolic chemical. F- will also inhibit complex 4 of the electron transport chain. So, I mean, how much worse could that be? It messes up the first step of glucose metabolism and glycolysis. The second step, Krebs cycle. The third step, oxidative phosphorylation, causing mitochondrial damage. Mitochondrial damage can be perceived by the cell as a metabolic emergency, equivalently to not having oxygen, and thus lead to cancer transformation of a cell. Okay, about how much worse could something be than that? Okay, so now let's look at more side effects. We talked about glycolysis inhibited, Krebs cycles inhibited, electron transport and phosphorylation are inhibited. Kind of reminds me of Warburg effect, damaging the mitochondrial ability to use oxygen and make ATP because you can't get the stuff up to it. Okay, damages DNA because it can substitute for hydrogen. Yep. It damages DNA synthesis because it'll block the enzyme thymidylate synthase. It'll disrupt calcium metabolism, and that's why it can contribute to some of these spine diseases, because it'll increase parathyroid hormone, which will then deossify bones, contributing to osteoporosis. It will also cause increased ossification of the ligaments, so it can contribute to DISH, diffuse idiopathic skeletal hyperostosis, whereby the bones are demineralized, but the ossific bridges, osteophytes, are hyperossified. That's bad. It makes a stiff, weak spine. I see these all the time. I think the main problem is ischemia, but I see this as a secondary contributor. Okay, it elevates parathyroid hormone, which causes a secondary hyperparathyroidism, and that further disrupts calcium metabolism, causes a little bit of an increase in insulin resistance. And that's thought to contribute to increased risk of diabetes with aging. Okay, it can contribute to autoimmune disease because by distorting the shape of proteins, it can distort their ability to be recognized as normal by the immune system, and they can now be recognized as damaged. Damaged proteins can be called DAMPs, disease-associated molecular patterns. You need to know that, DAMPs. So a distorted protein can be seen as DAMPs, meaning a damaged protein by the immune system, and thus it'll cause the immune system to destroy that cell. Okay, so it forces the cell to go into programmed cell death, apoptosis. It can disrupt, or even worse, just necrotic lysis. Okay, it'll disrupt collagen synthesis because it prevents hydroxylation of proline, which is a very important amino acid in the structure of collagen. Collagen is the most common protein in the human body. It's the glue that holds the entire human body together. And poor collagen function is associated with arthritis, pain, weakness, accelerated aging, and more wrinkles. I mean, remember scurvy, which used to kill all the British sailors before they became limeys, eating limes? Well, vitamin C deficiency damages collagen. All right. So what I'm trying to say is it has a similar effect. Look at the typical American. They're not eating their enough fruits and vegetables to get their vitamin C, and they're simultaneously ingesting F minus. That's a part of why they're wrinkled and weak, and their collagen's weak. Okay, when collagen synthesis is disrupted, you get more of these subtype modified amino acids in the blood, which one sees with ingestion of F minus. Aluminum and F minus can form complexes that will mimic a phosphate group, and this will disrupt enzyme function. So there's not just one, it's numerous metabolic problems. Okay, and then the one I care about the most is it'll contribute to brain damage, lowering of IQ, and this is well known. F minus water is associated with increased risk of hypothyroidism, like another halogen. Potentially it can compete for binding sites with, iodine. Not good. Iodine is used to make thyroid hormones, so we actually do need a little bit of iodine. F minus inhibits amino acid and neurotransmitter metabolism. It'll block glutamine synthase, which is an important metabolite. This can be associated with increased anxiety. In animal studies, F minus was associated with atrophy of the pituitary. It's associated with calcification of the pineal gland in the brain and potentially decreased melatonin production. Not good. The pineal gland lacks a full blood-brain barrier. Makes it more vulnerable. F minus is related to increased parathyroid hormone. We talked about that, causing increased cytoplasm calcium in brain cells. Not good. In the water, aluminum is used as a clarifier. So you're simultaneously taking municipal water and putting aluminum as a clarifier and F minus as a sanitizer. Guess what? You're increasing the risk of lowering IQs, okay? Potentially increasing the risk of ADHD and potentially increasing the risk of Alzheimer's with that aluminum. That is aluminum more so. Increasing the risk of cancer with the F minus. Stupid. Okay, in rats, prenatal exposure to F minus associated with more hyperactivity, decreased learning ability. It's associated with hippocampal damage in rats, probably in humans, I would guess. I don't have a study to prove that, but there's a lot of reason to support that. And also the inhibition of metabolism can, of course, be very damaging to neurons. Populations that have more F minus in their water have more Down syndrome. Okay, that might be the last slide here. Let me just check. Oh no, I got another one. How do you avoid it? Well, don't use toothpaste. Don't use mouthwash, or certainly get one that doesn't have it in there. I don't even use toothpaste anymore. I just brush my teeth with a plain brush about once a week, twice a week to remove the biofilms in which bacteria can potentially hide. I rinse my teeth with water always afterwards. I don't eat any sweets. I don't eat anything acidic like the bubbles, the soda pops, or the bubbled water, carbonated water. Manufacturers know how toxic it is. That's why they always say, call poison control if you swallow it. If you put it in the toothpaste, some people say it can increase erosion of mercury amalgam fillings. I would not do that. I would find that really stupid to take F minus toothpaste and rub that on your fillings. You're going to potentially be volatilizing mercury into your mouth, your blood, your breathing. I would move to an area where there's no F minus in the water if possible, or get a well water. If you have to have it in your water, like you live in the city and it's in your water, I would definitely have reverse osmosis in one's kitchen. And I would shower less often. Okay, F minus can be removed from water with reverse osmosis or distillation. I talked about always eating first to avoid the hypo-osmolar effect of excessive filtration, like reverse osmosis. If I had lived in it and had no choice, I would take shorter showers, less frequent showers, because you can also inhale it if you're taking a shower in that water. I would not cook on anything with Teflon cookware because it has POFA with F minus in there, or F minus related compounds. I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't use that for infant formula as the F minus. I did drink F minus water when I was a kid because I didn't know any better. Nobody knew any better, and I probably would have been even a lot smarter if I hadn't. But, I'm okay, but I would have preferred not to have had it. Okay, avoid fluorescent lights. Well, that's kind of another subject. I don't want to go on to that. Avoid foods that are potentially high in F minus. Some say that your tea or your soy might concentrate it. I think those things are both to be avoided. Cigarette smoke can be high in F minus. Coal burning electric plants pump a lot of F minus into the atmosphere. It's also present in car and truck exhaust. All bad. I don't know about the home air conditioners. a little bit of a complex subject. We're not going to get into that too much here. Okay, so I'm concerned about the Freon. Okay, plant-based diets contain lots of antioxidants like vitamin C. Vitamin C helps improve collagen synthesis. It helps to function as an antioxidant that will block things that have perhaps been impaired by F-. It can block some of the effects of F-. Glutathione also helps block this. You get your antioxidants from eating your fruits and vegetables, okay, and your other plant foods. Plants are high in folate, which helps to overcome the negative effect of F- on making DNA. I think this is the last slide. Let's see here. Oh, we just got the references. So here's references if anybody wants to look this up. There's a whole bunch of papers on this subject. I like the researcher named Christian Frezza. He talks about how you accumulate a Krebs cycle intermediate because of a problem with running Krebs cycle. You potentially can all activate your cancer pathways because, again, it's sensed as mitochondrial injury, therefore can't run oxygen metabolism, therefore switch to anaerobic metabolism off of glycolysis. Like about here, I know F- also inhibits glycolysis, but you can overwhelm sometimes an inhibitor just by running multiple versions of it in parallel. Here's some of the other effects it has. Corrosion of dental amalgams, that's not good. Other effects on, contributing to brain damage, disrupted calcium metabolism, that's all bad. So anyways, my advice, get a reverse osmosis if you can. At least get a carbon filter for your house, preferably without F-. I'll leave it at that. Hope that's helpful.